Welcome. I am Michael Killen of the Killen Report, and I believe the statement from the Paris Climate Accord that we cannot allow the temperature of the planet to increase 2 degrees centigrade is important. However, policymakers and organizations around the world have a difficult time understanding what that statement really means. I have invited the noted scientist, Dr. Alex Cannara, to have a discussion with me to help everyone understand what that statement means. And near the end of this session, I will ask him, where are we from increasing the temperature of the planet 2 degrees? Alex, can I call you
Michael.
Alex, or do I have to call you Dr. Canara?
No, Alex is just fine.
All right. I have taken a look at the Paris Climate Accord statement, and I believe we need 4 pieces of data to get an understanding of what that statement means. And I wonder if you agree with me, and if you do, would you slowly give us the 4 pieces of data that are needed, and maybe even make a comment of why that piece of data is needed?
Okay, well, the Paris Accords are actually voluntary negotiated commitments, and there's not really any enforcement of that. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that where the temperature in the Earth on the Earth exceeds 2 degrees C or doesn't depends upon actually where you are on the Earth. And so it's a hard thing to come up with a simple number by saying, well, we want to prevent average Earth temperature from going up 2 degrees centigrade. Right. So that's kind of a hard thing, because I'm looking at a chart which I sent you before here that shows the world in a flat map, color coded for what regions have already exceeded the target temperature rise of about 2 degrees centigrade, and what areas have not, and when we scientists think they will. So going away from the equator, we have more time to get to control our emissions. But along the equator, there are a lot of areas that have already gotten much warmer than we would
Good.
like.
Now, that's a good point, but haven't the members of the Paris Climate Accord estimated the global average temperature? Haven't they done that?
Yes, yeah, I believe so. I'm not, again, that's a hard estimate to come by, but I believe so. And we can look at all the different sources of data and compare that and see how close they are.
So what are the fundamental 4 pieces of data that we need to know to get a feeling what a 2-degree increase in the temperature of the planet really means?
We need to understand what happens for agriculture in particular as temperature rises, and a 2 degrees centigrade rise in certain areas. We probably have the ability to develop data on that.
Let me ask you this. Don't we need to know the date and temperature that the other scientists have used to start the process of being able to come up with a number? So what year is the starting point?
Well, I mean, the year starting point is 2000, or actually before 2000.
No, the very
The very start would have been about the time we started taking accurate measurements, which was 1880, I believe it is.
Yes, and other scientists, haven't they come up with the temperature at that time?
Yes, average temperature for the planet. because they didn't have what we have today, which are satellites, we can see every section of the planet. They
Yes.
couldn't do that.
So am I correct? You just gave us two fundamental pieces of data that can help us start to think about what the Paris Climate Accord is. What are the other two fundamental pieces of data?
Well, we need to actually keep track of how weather changes by latitude, because the Earth naturally cools itself, just as we sweat, by moving water vapor from the tropics up north to higher latitudes and down south to higher latitudes. That's one way in which the planet actually cools itself.
Okay, Alex, what is the temperature, the global average temperature of the Earth right now?
That's a tough one for me to answer, because I'm looking right now at this map of the Earth, and we've already departed from the 2 degrees C rise that we want to avoid in some regions of the Earth. Most of it we haven't yet. So I would say that the average temperature is something like 1.5 degree rise.
Okay, that's great. And we know what year it is.
Yes.
Now, how far away? It sounds to me we're 5 degrees away from 2 degrees centigrade rise. When are we going to possibly hit 2 degrees centigrade? And now here is where your great scientific mind has to come in.
Well, as I've said, I'm looking at this graphic of the Earth, and in flat format, color coded for where it's hottest and where it's coolest. And so if we look at an average, we're trying to come up with an average. It looks to me like the chart says 2060. 2060 would be the date that we would average around the world what the climate accord is trying to prevent.
That's 40 years from now.
Well, no, 20 years from now, because this is 2060. Oh, 2060. Yeah, I'm sorry. 40 years from now. That's right.
Okay. Now, your statement, is that the statement that would be accepted by the folks at the Paris Climate Accord? And you might want to tell the audience where that organization gets its scientific data from.
Oh, well, the European Union has a scientific equivalent of our NASA, for instance, and so forth. So we have a lot of different scientists around the world and different organizations that are funded nationally, and they get together and meet and discuss and come up with predictions and models and so forth. The thing that's interesting is that we have this voluntary agreement to do something from the Paris Accords, but we're not actually really sure what the effect is of any particular actions that these people who agreed the 2 degrees C is something to avoid.
Okay. What role does the IPCC play?
IPCC is the climate data and analysis function in this overall worldwide organization of scientists. So we look to them for compiling all the relevant measurements from around the world, satellite data and so forth, and developing models to predict what could happen.
Now, tell me, what do you think is going to happen to us if we're still here when the temperature increases 2 degrees centigrade?
Well, we already see, as I said before, we already see in areas that have gotten warmer, we already see crop losses. We've seen water problems having enough water for people and crops. And so that part's going to get worse. There's no doubt about that. What is interesting too about the Earth is that apart from its self-cooling that I mentioned before, from tropical moisture, it does have areas that are controlled by ocean currents. And so, for instance, everybody knows about the warm current along the east coast of the United States. It keeps everything, warmer than it would be otherwise. And that Gulf Stream actually prevents Europe from freezing, Britain in particular, and Scotland, uh, because it takes warm water up toward the north, right? But as Greenland and northeastern Canada melts, the water from that is pure water, not salt water, and so it's lighter and it floats on top of the Gulf Stream up near Canada and pushes it down, which means that the warm Gulf Stream isn't seen as much by Northern Europe and England and so forth. So you got a problem there. The more we melt Canada and Greenland, uh, the, the colder it's going to get in Northern Europe. And there's a big dark blue blob in the under Greenland that on these maps that shows you, hey, this is going to be an issue. We're going to freeze England while we cook everybody else.
All
So
right.
this is part of the problem. We have to look at all the details before someone can actually say, well, what should we actually do and what can we actually predict?
Okay. You are, of course, discussing some of the climate tipping points. And I think in another show, I would like to do all 9 tipping points with you. But I'd like to go to one other topic because we're running out of time. It seems like since you and I have been alive, the world has always had a choice between economic growth and dealing with some of the threats. What year do you think the United States, Europe, China will make the decision of not focusing on economic growth, but doing something about climate change? And I think right now, we aren't trying to do things, but this is not a serious effort. So Alex, what year do you think the people on this planet will wake up and take climate change seriously?
Pretty soon from now, I think, because we have another issue that's coming in that people haven't been told about, really, and the release of methane from natural sources that are warming up, like tundra and the ocean floor. There's a great deal of organic matter that has decayed, but the methane from that decay is stored in the soils and the seafloor, and that is a worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So by warming the planet, we were making it worse.
So that's another climate tipping point.
Yes, yeah.
So you think pretty soon the world is going to start taking serious action to stop global warming and its impact, climate change. What is pretty soon? 5 years, 2 years, 10 years?
Well, there's already actions taken by banks funding different businesses and looking at their carbon footprint, for instance. We got to look at the methane footprint too. We haven't done that yet, but we know that fracking has caused us to be a big producer of methane by leakage. And so we're actually making things worse 2 ways: carbon dioxide, carbon burning, and methane for natural gas, that kind of thing. So I think the banks are actually are getting at it now. There's an article in The Economist just the other day about that. So banks are saying, well, what's your carbon footprint? And so we'll loan you money, but you've got to show us that you're not going to go bankrupt because later on somebody charges you for all the emissions.
All right, wonderful, Alex. You've been a great guest, and I want to thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the viewers for letting us into their office and home. Hi, I'm Michael Killen, and the background on the wall is paintings I have made to help bring attention to various developments and threats of climate change. Again, Alex, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
All right.